Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so delighted today to be talking to the fantastic team behind the movie The Paper Tigers. We have Bao Tran, who's the writer and director, and cast members Alain, Ron Yuan, and Mykel Shannon Jenkins. Thank you so much for joining us. And Bao, I wanted to start by asking you about the development process with your script, because, you know, like any script, this was being developed and written and evolved over the course of several years. And once you had the main foundation of the story, I was really interested in what were the narrative and character details that you were continuing to work on and continuing to finesse during that time.
Well, making a film is a whole process, even when you're writing on the day you're shooting, and you're also rewriting in a way when you're editing. So it's kind of like always just being honest and truthful to what was happening with the characters and then the moment of the story, because when these three fine gentlemen come on set, you're going to get a lot of new fresh takes and a lot of new fresh ideas than what you had, sitting in your room alone writing, in the dark, the script itself, right? So you have just a wonderful kind of a mixing pot of all these wonderful new fresh ideas on the day. And then when you're editing, now you have an embarrassment of riches of so many different options and performances and little things that could kind of like suggest things or not suggest things. And you have all those things to play with. So it was the constant evolution, obviously trying to balance the tone that we were having and the mood in terms of the seriousness and the comedy and all that stuff. So, I mean, that was kind of this whole attentiveness that you kind of have to be open to throughout the whole process, because you're just getting new goodies and new surprises every day.
And then, Alain, I wanted to ask you about the relationship with your character and his son, because I think you do a really beautiful job in capturing a lot of the internal struggle of what it means to be a parent and to realize that you're not achieving certain things as a parent that you really want to for your child. And I feel like particularly there's a lot of moments with the two of you in the car together where you can see the internal processing that your character is going through, even though he's not having this conversation out loud with his son. And so I was interested in how you approached bringing that into your performance in that way.
Well, I have a son, and he's a little bit younger than what Josiah played. But I think for me, it's really that constant struggle of trying to figure out how you could balance, some of the more real things in your life in terms of paying bills and having a job and having that duty as a parent. I think, one of my brothers mentioned to me, he's like, there is no such thing as balance, because something is going to fall, whether it's your personal life or it's your professional life or your family life. So for a character like Danny, he's obviously trying his best, but I also feel like as if his bearing himself into work because he's trying to avoid certain things. And I think in this instance, when you see him in the car, it's almost easier for him to go attack something like work as opposed to being a parent. I think you kind of see his arc in that regard throughout the entire film in terms of how does he process what's important and what's not important. And when that character finally realizes, like, what, they're all kind of interconnected. And so for me as an actor, as a person who is a father, all of those things I could definitely relate to in terms of trying to make sure that you're also, you're handling some of your business as a father, but as a person who's bringing in money and all those responsibilities that you have. So yeah, I think it was an easy transition to play Danny in that regard.
Yeah. And Ron, I wanted to ask you about some of the comedic elements with your character, because there's so many great lines and moments that you bring in, but the reason that it works so well is because it's always rooted in who your character is. It's always really grounded through your performance. So how did you set about finding the comedic tone for your performance within a lot of the scenes?
Yeah, I appreciate that. For me, when I first got the script from Bao, I was really jazzed because just innately, it was such a fun, heartfelt script. So even the stuff that was there, it reminded me of times in my personal life, and for me, I took it from the perspective that when my two brothers left, I became really depressed and I basically lost my family. So what sometimes people do is they substitute that with comedy, with humor. They'll make jokes, they'll do this, and then the emotional eating aspect of it, which was helped by Bao because he just kept telling me, you got to gain more weight. So I actually felt that. And I've been also in my own past an emotional eater, with anything traumatic or just stuff, and so for me, I really put that into the character too. And so this guy is really just a lonely kind of sad dude that hides this aspects of his life because, you know, he lost his fam. And then when these two brothers come back, it's like, boom, he just feels like he has a chance. There's hope again for life. And that's kind of the approach that I took for the character. And for me, I'm just very thankful to Bao too, that he allowed me to play and improv. And, you know, we just did it, you know, a lot of different ways. And just, we all just had so much fun on this. So.
Yeah. And then Mykel, I wanted to ask you about the mentorship with your character, because, you know, particularly as the narrative evolves, we really see him as someone who is putting a lot of himself forward for others, particularly in some of the later scenes with Danny. You know, he's the person there to say, this is possible and you can do it and I believe in you, and instills that faith into himself. And so I was interested in how you wanted to really build out that aspect of him as a character, particularly thinking about the genesis of this coming from his relationship with Sifu.
Well, I have an older brother, and I've always been like the mouth in the group that always started the trouble. And he was always like, when the trouble really happens, he was always the guy that like we were all like, so what are we gonna do? So like I always really wanted to be him. So it's one thing to target, and then you see that like you're really the problem, and like he's solving it. And to this day, like I have admired that. So when I looked at this script, I said, oh my gosh. So this is like, I'm like both me and my brother in the same, like there's an opportunity for me to grow up, which never really happens when you have an older brother. He's always the older brother. But in this situation, I saw it. I saw, rarely do you, as an African-American man, get to play roles where you think, where you grow, where you become something better than what you started. And it's flushed out so beautifully and naturally through a set of honest circumstances. So when I saw the possibilities and then I met these two amazing artists, I really allowed it to happen, which is what was great. I built the character understanding that we were supposed to go away overseas and kick everybody's ass, and I was going to be the rah-rah guy, and he was going to be the man of action, and then it didn't happen. And how you got to go find yourself when you bet on somebody else, and they don't live it out, and now you got nothing, really, nothing to hold yourself up with. So you go find yourself, and in finding yourself, you realize, wait a minute, you kind of had everything, you just didn't use it. And then we got a chance to put it back together. I was like, I didn't even know what it was going to look like. We would talk about it. And I was like, I just know it's going to feel right. It's going to feel right when we get there. And Bao set the schedule up where by that time, I would do anything for Alain right now. As his brother right now, I told him earlier, like, I'm with you. I'll stand beside you and do it all, bro. So whatever it is. And I meant that, like, so like to have the opportunity in that moment to just be honest and real, and like, you know, he set it up very nicely where he had been hurt, and like, you know, you just want to go get some, you want some get back. You want some get back. And so like my man's is to get back. Like I don't gotta throw a punch telling you, bro. And it's kind of like how, you know, my brother would do all the ass whipping. Like I do all the talking, he'd do the whipping. So it's a throwback. You understand? So I enjoy it. It was quite an experience because we didn't win all the time, but we won. Paper Tigers did, and I was really happy with the way it turned out. Really excited at the fact that Bao let it breathe, and you know he just let us be real. And I don't even know what to say about it. I'm humbled by the whole experience, actually.
Yeah. And Bao, I also wanted to ask you about some of the proof of concept scenes that you shot early on for this film that are part of the project itself. You know, we see those early scenes with the younger versions of these characters are part of how you worked to get producers on board and to get financing, and used it for crowdfunding as well. And so I just wanted to ask about shooting those scenes and why it was specifically that you shot the beginning of the movie rather than trying to create a short film version, because it's so brilliant with the fact that then you shot something that fits perfectly into the film and you could utilize in the story, and how shooting those scenes really created the initial tone at the beginning of the movie for you.
Yeah, so that you're touching on a point. I think in terms of when you're trying to get a feature film off the ground, obviously there's many ways to kind of like go about it. One of the common things is to kind of shoot a proof of concept, which is kind of a short film or some encapsulation or some type of shortened version of the feature, and that always felt like burnt cycles to me. It just felt like I don't understand why making movies so hard. Why are we doing like this side piece, when we could be doing this? So fortunately, it worked out, like you're saying, with the script that we had a younger portion or a flashback portion or a prologue portion that was almost a standalone piece. So we did have some part of the money in place, and with indie filmmaking, this is kind of like, well, this is the indie film life, but we had some portion of the film, so we just wanted to shoot something, get something in the can, and hopefully that gets the ball rolling, and we can get the rest of the money to shoot the rest of the film. So yeah, I just wanted to shoot pages of the film, so and have something, and I have to like go back and reinvent the wheel. So that was the one thing. The second thing that was a kind of a nice happenstance was, in a lot of ways, that was its own cast with its own set of rules and feeling and vibe, because those actors that play the younger version of these three tigers, they had that swag because they were number one, number two, and number three on the call sheet, and they didn't have to consult with their other versions that how are you going to play it or compare notes. This was 2 years before we shot the rest of the film, so they were able to kind of form and kind of go through that same process that I had with the older tigers of just creatively creating those characters in their own way, in their own style, in their own mode, because exactly kind of reflect that kind of like young 20s vibe of just becoming your own man and becoming your own, coming into your own. So it has that energy, and that just that's the nice unexpected surprise that it comes out from that. So thankfully it kind of feeds and flows into the rest of the film.
Yeah. And then I wanted to ask all of you a little bit about the development of the character Sifu, who's their master and mentor, because he's a character that we primarily know so well throughout the film because of the way that everybody else talks about him and remembers him and discusses him. And he's not really physically a presence throughout the film, and yet we really feel him as a character throughout. And so for Bao, I was interested in the writing and development and the way that you really thought about the construction of him as a character. And then for the rest of you, how you really constructed that into your character's backstory and thinking about their relationship and their history and some of the traits that they've developed from what he taught and instilled in them.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I really I looked at, and I just kind of appreciated kind of films like The Third Man or Big Chill. In a lot of ways, this is kind of like a kung fu Big Chill, but you had these characters who were gone in death or gone in, just out of the picture, literally out of the picture, and talked about, and just the way the characters can remember them or speak about them with each other. You start to form like almost like a mosaic of who this person is. And I thought that was such an interesting way to kind of like build up this ideal, because almost in a lot of ways, you once you meet the person, it's like the person is not that legend. So we wanted to kind of build that mystique, because the bigger that mystique was, the shorter the fall is that we see the tigers of falling short of that. It has that kind of like contrast that we wanted to create. And Roger, actually, who's by coincidence Ram's brother, plays Sifu, so it has like, even visually there's some connection with the tigers. Even you feel that throughout the film, and then you have this big funeral portrait that just looms over them. So I was like that kind of like feeling of just kind of like this pressure that we may not actually have in front of us as a person, but that we carry this weight or this burden, and we figure out what to do with it because we believe in it so much. It's a much more less tangible thing. It's kind of like this ethereal obligation that I think it makes it really interesting in the film.
And then I also wanted to ask you all a little bit about the way in which you construct a lot of the moves and the stunt sequences, because what you do is so fantastic in the way that all of these fight sequences show us the training that was instilled in them, all of the years that they spent becoming masters at their craft, but also, again, allowing for the length of time in which they haven't been practicing. And so I think it's really interesting in looking at the minutiae of a lot of the movement that you all have in your performances in those scenes, in where you kind of allow it to gradually come back and where you allow their craft to evolve back into them again as it becomes second nature at this point. And so I was interested in how you really thought so specifically about the evolution of what that would be for each of your characters.
I think for me, it was just a matter of the fact that I haven't trained very much in martial arts. So it's been a while. I was a kid when I did anything that was martial arts. So it kind of rang true. It's almost like how do I get into shape here? And it really lends itself to the character. But it's really a testament to the action director, Kenny, and the team. It's, you know, he really took the time out, as well as Bao, to figure out like how quickly do they get it back? Do they even get it back? And then, you know, in the instance with the Hing character and the Jim character, they could talk about the movements for them, but for me it was interesting to kind of play in that space, and understanding that this character will have limitations, and my own personal ego is like, no, he should be pretty amazing and doing all these things, but that's not realistic. Like, if you haven't done anything in, you know, 25, 30 years, you're going to be very rusty. Even though your mind says you could do it, your body's not going to let you do it. So I think it all kind of, the reality of everything really just kind of spoke volumes to how they choreographed it.
I'm gonna talk just on top of that real short. Like the fight team, I've never been a part. I've done Undisputed, some other martial arts. Like, I've never been a part of a fight team where the fight was actually in itself its own story, and not like a story of moves, but a story that worked with the story of the artist. So the trust for the fight team is like easy when they're like, yeah, but we're thinking. I mean, they were cerebral with it. It was beautiful because it's like, you could tell the story without dialogue. Like, we're telling the same story physically as human beings that we went on to try to tell in the fight. So for me, I just was like trying to honor that truth as an artist and live in that space. So it was again, kudos. And they did the job, and they stayed on it. Like, what are you thinking? And I'm thinking this, and this is why. And why did I was like, wow, like you just know what's right because it is. So that really worked for me, resonated for me.
Yeah, I want to, the same thing, give a shout out to Kenny and Sam and Carrie. They were awesome. I actually worked with Sam and Carrie before, so like, you know, just joining the project, it was like more fam and more family. You know? But we all had fun, and they know I'm a clown too, so we all joked around a lot. As far as like working it in, yeah, because Bao had me gain weight, so I gained like 68 pounds for the role. But for me, when I gained that weight, I naturally started having a limp, and you know, and I was depressed by all the salt intake I was taking because I was so fat and bloated, but it worked great. It was the first time I'm like, fuck, I look crazy bad, salt loaded, all that stuff, but awesome, you know. So it's like, and then I remember I wanted to incorporate like this in one part with the fight with the younger kids in the pool. You know, wanted to throw just a spinning hook, jump spinning hook kick, and the stunt team were like, are you sure you can do it? And the whole point was, yeah, my whole point is I'm going to fall and hurt my knee with it. So I kind of want to, so yeah, it was funny. It was fun, you know, building that in. And to your first question with the Sifu, yeah, like having Sifu played by my brother, I really felt the tie, the bond, but I also felt like, you know, as brothers, you also have differences and stuff. So I took that in, and blending that with the Sifu dad aspect, it was, yeah, I felt it, you know, and I believe like my brothers felt it too. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, exactly what you all were saying, those scenes work so well because there's so much about character, and that's really the heart and soul of this film. So congratulations on all of it. And thank you so much for this conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maro.